For Moscow's quarantined.
10万。
Cameras are watching.
对于被隔离的莫斯科来说，有10万台摄像机在监视着。
By Victoria Loganova Yakovleva.
维多利亚·洛基诺娃、雅科夫列娃。
Sent to Kindle Moscow AFP. A vast and contentious network of facial recognition cameras keeping watch over Moscow is now playing a key role in the battle against the spread of the coronavirus in Russia.
莫斯科法新社，一个庞大而富有争议的面部识别摄像机网络正在监视着莫斯科。这个网络在防止冠状病毒在俄罗斯蔓延的斗争中扮演着关键的角色。
The city rolled out the technology just before the epidemic reached Russia, ignoring protests and legal complaints over sophisticated state surveillance.
就在疫情蔓延到俄罗斯之前，该市推出了这项技术，无视抗议活动和有关政府复杂监控的法律投诉。
Since last month, thousands of Muscovites have been confined to their homes for 14 days of compulsory quarantine after returning from virus-hit countries, being in contact with those infected or diagnosed with mild symptoms.
自上个月以来，数千名莫斯科人从受病毒感染的国家返回后，被强制隔离在家中长达14天。他们与受感染者接触，或被诊断出症状轻微。
Police have logged their details and warned them that sneaking out into the city of 16 million residents and daily visitors could lead to a 5-year jail term or deportation for foreigners.
警方已经记录了他们的详细信息，并警告他们，如果偷偷潜入这个拥有1600万居民和每日来访者的城市，可能会导致外国人被判处5年监禁或被驱逐出境。
We are constantly checking that this regulation is being observed, including through the use of automated facial recognition systems, Mayor Sergei Sobyanin wrote in his blog in February.
市长
Sergei Sobyanin
在2月份的博客中写道，我们一直在检查这项规定是否被遵守，包括通过使用自动面部识别系统。
The Russian capital already had a tight network of 170,000 security cameras, set up in streets and metro stations throughout the city over the past decade.
在过去的10年里，这个俄罗斯首都已经在街道和地铁站安装了由17万个安全摄像头组成的严密网络。
Around 100,000 have now been linked to artificial intelligence systems that can identify people being filmed. The remaining cameras are due to be connected soon.
目前已经有大约10万个人工智能系统可以识别被拍摄的人，剩下的摄像头很快就要连接了。
Moscow police said last week that the cameras that are linked have allowed them to identify almost 200 people who broke quarantine rules.
莫斯科警方上周表示，相连的摄像头使他们能够识别近200名违反隔离规定的人。
As well as the cameras, Russia has said it is drawing on an array of technology to fight the virus, including telemedicine consultations, the real-time monitoring of supermarket shelves, and identifying and removing false news stories from social media.
除了摄像头，俄罗斯还表示，它正在利用一系列技术来对抗病毒，包括远程医疗咨询，对超市货架进行实时监控，以及从社交媒体上识别和删除虚假新闻报道。
President Vladimir Putin last week toured a high-tech center set up to monitor the virus situation and Russia's response.
俄罗斯总统弗拉基米尔·普京
Vladimir Putin
上周参观了一个高科技中心，该中心旨在监控病毒情况和俄罗斯的应对措施。
The country, as of Monday, had reported 438 coronavirus infections, most of them in Moscow. One person who was infected has died, but officials are not linking the death to the virus.
截止周一，该国报告了438例冠状病毒感染，其中大多数发生在莫斯科。一名感染者已经死亡，但官方没有将死亡与病毒联系起来。600
Neighbors, 600
个邻居
Moscow City Hall has boasted that the network of cameras is a particularly effective tool.
莫斯科市政厅曾夸耀说，摄像机网络是一个特别有效的工具。
Sobyanin has said that the authorities have contacts and work addresses for 95% of those quarantined after returning from high-risk countries.
索比亚宁说，当局为95%从高风险国家返回后被隔离的人提供了联系人和工作地点。
We've identified where they are, said the mayor, who heads a working group on combating the virus set up by Putin.
我们已经确定了他们的位置。这位市长表示，他领导着一个由普京设立的抗击病毒工作组。
Last month on his blog he praised the efficiency of the facial recognition system with a story of a Chinese woman who tested positive soon after arrival and was hospitalized.
上个月，他在自己的博客上称赞了面部识别系统的高效性，并讲述了一位中国女性的故事。
Her flatmate was quarantined but security cameras filmed her walking outside and meeting a male friend.
她的室友被隔离，但监控录像拍下了她在外面和一个男性朋友见面的过程。
The mayor added that the authorities swiftly gathered contacts of more than 600 of the woman's neighbors and even her taxi driver from the airport.
市长补充说，当局迅速联系了该女子的600多名邻居。甚至还有他在机场的出租车司机。
Facial recognition technology was first tested during the 2018 World Cup in Russia before going fully online in January, just before the pandemic hit.
人脸识别技术在2018年俄罗斯世界杯期间进行了首次测试，直到今年1月全面投入使用。就在疫情爆发之前。
The probability of a mistake by our facial recognition algorithm is 1 in 15 million, said Alexander Minin, CEO of NTECH Lab, the company that won the city's tender to supply the technology in Tech Lab.
公司的首席执行官亚历山大·米宁说，我们的面部识别算法出错的概率是1500万分之一。
NTECH Lab.
公司赢得了该市提供该技术的招标。
The firm's devices, which have been exported to China and Latin America, can identify someone from their silhouette alone 80% of the time, he told AFP at the start of the year.
该公司的设备已经出口到中国和拉丁美洲。80%的时候，他告诉法新社。
Russia alongside China lead the field globally with the most sophisticated technology, which they export to some 100 countries. Valentin Weber, a researcher in cybersecurity at the University of Oxford, wrote in a 2019 paper.
牛津大学
University of Oxford.
网络安全研究员瓦伦丁·韦伯
Valentin Weber.
在2019年的一篇论文中写道，俄罗斯与中国一道。以最尖端的技术在全球领先，并出口到约100个国家。
Big Brother.
老大哥。
Due to stronger data protection laws in Europe, facial recognition has not yet been implemented on a large scale. Russian and Chinese companies have had less legal constraints to gather and use data than their European counterparts, Weber told AFP.
由于欧洲强有力的数据保护法。面部识别还没有大规模实施。与欧洲同行相比，俄罗斯和中国公司在收集和使用数据方面受到的法律限制较少。
Before the coronavirus pandemic, critics warned of the potential for excessive state surveillance reminiscent of the all-seeing Big Brother in George Orwell's novel 1984.
在冠状病毒大流行之前，批评人士警告说。过度的国家监督可能会让人想起乔治·奥威尔
George Orwell
的小说《1984》中那种无所不在的老大哥。
Big Brother. The fear was that rather than protecting the general public, the cameras would be used to monitor Kremlin opponents and undermine civil liberties.
人们担心的是，这些摄像头不是用来保护普通公众。而是用来监视克里姆林宫的反对者和破坏公民自由。
The security argument is the one always used to justify loss of privacy and personal liberty. That's where the greatest problem and the greatest danger lie, said French cybersecurity researcher and renowned hacker Baptiste Robert.
安全方面的论点总是被用来为失去隐私和个人自由辩护，这就是最大的问题和最大的危险所在。法国网络安全研究员和著名黑客巴蒂斯特·罗伯特说。
The technology's creator Minin says that he has confidence in the Moscow authorities and insists that personal data like passport details and phone numbers is not stored on the same databases as camera images.
这项技术的发明者米宁说，他对莫斯科当局有信心，并坚持认为像护照详情和电话号码这样的个人数据不会像相机图像那样存储在同一个数据库里。
He says the data sets can only be matched by law enforcement if deemed strictly necessary.
他说，只有在认为严格必要的情况下，执法部门才能对数据集进行匹配。
But opponents see such technology as threatening, given the Soviet history of mass surveillance of those deemed by the KGB's secret police to be state enemies.
但反对者认为这种技术具有威胁性。因为苏联历史上曾大规模监视那些被克格勃秘密警察视为国家敌人的人。
Vocal rights activist and lawyer Alyona Popova launched legal action against the use of facial recognition at an officially authorized opposition protest in September last year.
声乐维权人士和律师阿廖娜·波波娃
Alyona Popova
在去年9月的一次官方授权的反对派抗议活动中，对面部识别技术的使用提起了法律诉讼。
She said cameras were attached to metal detectors that every participant had to pass through.
她说，摄像机安装在每个参与者都必须通过的金属探测器上。
The massive use of facial recognition technology amounts to state surveillance of its citizens, and the state will certainly use it against political opponents, she told AFP.
他告诉法新社，大规模使用面部识别技术相当于国家对其公民的监视。国家肯定会用它来对付政治对手。
Her complaint was eventually thrown out, but an online petition she launched on change.org against the technology's use gained almost 75,000 signatures before the COVID-19 crisis.
她的投诉最终被驳回，但在
COVID-19
危机之前，他在
Change.org
上发起的反对该技术使用的在线请愿活动获得了近 7.5 万个签名。
The mayor's office denies the technology is used to monitor the opposition.
市长办公室否认这项技术被用于监视反对派。
Yet to highlight the issue, 4 activists in February protested outside the presidential administration offices, their faces brightly painted with geometrical shapes and lines said to confuse cameras.
然而，为了突出这个问题，今年2月，4名活动人士在总统办公室外抗议，他们的脸上涂着明亮的几何图形和线条，据说可以迷惑摄像机。
A similar protest took place in London.
伦敦也发生了类似的抗议活动。
There have already been cases of political activists who were detained in the metro after being identified with the help of cameras, said one of the protesters, artist Katrin Nenasheva.
其中一名抗议者，艺术家卡特琳·涅纳舍娃
Katrin Nenasheva
说，已经有一些政治活动人士在地铁中被捕。他们是在摄像机的帮助下被确认身份的。
4 of the activists were later fined 15,000 rubles $185 after being charged with organizing an unsanctioned protest.
其中4名活动人士后来因组织未经批准的抗议活动而被罚款 1.5 万卢布和185美元。
NTECH Lab Chief Minin warned that face painting or covering up ultimately won't help those wanting to avoid being identified in Tech Lab.
负责人
Minin
警告说，脸部彩绘或遮盖最终不会帮助那些想要避免被识别的人。
We can work even when up to 40% of the face is covered by a helmet or medical mask, he said.
我们可以工作，即使高达 40% 的面部是由一个头盔或医疗面罩。他说。